The story of the 10 plagues of Egypt is one of the most dramatic, epic tales ever told. But what if it's more than just a story about punishment? What if it was actually a carefully planned, divine showdown, a contest designed to answer one huge question for the entire world: who is the one true God?
I mean, think about the matchup. On one side, you've got Moses, an 80-year-old shepherd who's been hiding out in the desert for decades. And on the other, Pharaoh, the absolute ruler of the most powerful empire on earth, a guy who was literally worshipped as a living god. It seems like a total mismatch, right? But that's the whole point. This was never supposed to be a battle between two men. It was always a battle between their gods.
So, the whole thing kicks off when God gives Moses and his brother Aaron this just audacious mission. He tells them, go to Pharaoh and demand that he release the entire Israelite slave population. Now, this wasn't just some economic request. This was a direct challenge to Pharaoh's power, his authority, and his claim to be a god himself.
And to really get what happens next, you have to understand the culture of ancient Egypt. See, you couldn't just walk up to the king and say, hey, a god sent me. You had to prove it. Messengers of the gods were expected to perform some kind of miracle, a sign to validate their authority. So right from the get-go, this whole thing is framed as a public contest of power.
Okay, so the first confrontations begin. And it's not this immediate, all-out assault of plagues. Nope. First, we get this head-to-head competition between the power of God, which is represented by Aaron's staff, and the magic tricks of Pharaoh's own court sorcerers.
Aaron throws his staff on the ground, and boom, it transforms into a serpent. But then Pharaoh's magicians step up, using what was probably some kind of hypnosis or sleight of hand. They were known for making snakes rigid to look like staffs. They managed to replicate the trick. For a second, it almost looks like a tie. But then Aaron's serpent staff swallows the magician's serpent's whole. The message couldn't be clearer. Imitation is not the same thing as real power.
And you see this pattern continue. When the Nile River is turned to blood, the magicians are able to mimic the effect on a smaller scale. When the land is crawling with frogs, they actually manage to conjure up even more frogs. But here's the crucial detail, right? They can only add to the chaos. They have zero power to reverse the plague. They can't turn the blood back into water or make a single frog disappear. Real power isn't about making a mess, it's about being able to clean it up.
The third plague is where we see the real turning point. Moses strikes the dust of the ground, and it becomes swarms of gnats, or maybe lice, or stinging mosquitoes that just infest everything and everyone. This time, when the magicians try to do the same thing, they can't. They've finally hit a wall.
And this is the moment the entire contest shifts. Pharaoh's own spiritual experts, the guys whose job it is to handle the supernatural, they just give up. They turn to Pharaoh and say, this is the finger of God. They're admitting that they're up against a power that is fundamentally different and way, way superior to their own. The human part of this showdown, it's over.
So from this point on, the plagues escalate, and their real purpose becomes crystal clear. This was never just about making the Egyptians uncomfortable. Each and every plague was a direct, calculated theological attack on a specific Egyptian god.
And just to make the point impossible to miss, God literally draws a line in the sand. Starting with the fourth plague, the swarms of flies, the land of Goshen, which is where the Israelites lived, is completely spared. This distinction was proof positive that these weren't just random natural disasters. No, these were precise, targeted acts from a God who protects his own people.
And this war on idols just keeps going. The plague of frogs, that was a direct hit on Heket, their frog-headed goddess of fertility. The death of all that livestock, a total mockery of Apis, the sacred bull god they worshipped. With every single plague, the God of Israel was systematically demonstrating that Egypt's gods were completely powerless to protect the very things they were supposed to control.
And yet, despite everything, Pharaoh refuses to give in. You see this frustrating, predictable cycle play out again and again. While he's under the pressure of a plague, he'll back down, he'll bargain, he'll even admit that he's sinned. But the very second the plague is lifted, his heart hardens right back up and he breaks his promise. It's clear his pride was more important than anything else.
All of this brings up a really obvious question, doesn't it? If God is all-powerful, why go through this whole drawn-out 10-plague process? Why not just snap his fingers and free the Israelites in one single overwhelming moment?
And the answer is pretty profound. The goal wasn't just about liberation. It was about revelation. Getting the Israelites out of Egypt, that was actually the secondary objective. The primary goal was to put on a demonstration for the Egyptians, for the Israelites, and for all the surrounding nations of who God truly is.
I mean, just look at the 7th plague, a storm of hail and fire, so intense it was described as fire literally rolling on the ground. Something like that was completely unheard of in Egypt. It was a terrifying, awesome display, showing that this god wasn't just some local tribal deity. No, he had absolute authority over the fundamental forces of nature itself.
So when you boil it all down, the plagues had this amazing threefold purpose. Yes, part of it was to punish the incredible pride and cruelty of Pharaoh, but even more importantly, it was to broadcast God's power far beyond the borders of Egypt. And at the end of the day, the ultimate goal was to prove in a direct contest with one of the most powerful pantheons in the world that the Lord alone is the one true God.
You know, the story of the plagues reveals something pretty deep. The forces of evil, of tyranny, of pride in our world, they can be incredibly stubborn and persistent. Pharaoh's hardened heart is all the proof you need of that. But the ultimate message here is one of hope. It's that no matter how powerful evil seems, it has an end date. Only God is eternal.